What's up, Black Comic Lords? Good evening. It's your host, Paul, and welcome to our very first episode of Shadow Faction, our new monthly series that explores everything regarding Shadow Cabinet, the Milestone Universe series headed by Mr. Joe Illidge. How are you, Joe?
All right. How you doing this evening?
Legendary writer and editor, no stranger to the blackcomiclords family. Joe, we are tremendously excited about this series. People have been talking about it all over the internet. It is going over really well, and I guess you want to chat about it and tell a couple secrets.
Yeah. Listen, first off, we're really thankful. Well, first, thanks, of course, go to, DC Comics and the Milestone producers, Reginald Hudlin and Dennis Cowan. And then really, I have been blessed to spearhead this with a great team of creators that we'll talk about more as we go on. And then finally, the fans and the readers and the reviewers and all the people who came out for this. This is a really big event. This is the first Milestone series in over a year, as a follow-up to Icon versus Hardware. And so one of the things is that this story had to be the culmination of the big 4-year arc that started with Milestone Returns in 2020. And so there's a lot to talk about. And, it's really great to now have it out in the world and to be able to have these conversations.
Well, all right, let's jump into it. Before we get started, though, everyone who's watching this, please like this video and subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed already, and share this video over your social media because it helps us to get the algorithm going and helps us to do what we do. So before we go forwards, let's go a little bit backwards and take a look at the past of where we've been with Shadow Cabinet. So here's from the original series, Shadow Cabinet. Why don't you tell us who is the Shadow Cabinet and what was their role back in the day in Milestone 1.0?
Shadow Cabinet, interesting. This was the first inter-Milestone Universe crossover. It was called the Shadow War, and so all the titles flowed into this. And basically, what you found out is that there was this secret society of superheroes called the Shadow Cabinet. Their leader was a man named Dharma. Dharma had the ability of time view, so he was able to see the past and multiple futures. And so from his perspective, what he was trying to do was to ensure one future and prevent a number from more cataclysmic alternate futures. And so he had his group of secret heroes, and they were basically like, Mission Impossible meets the Justice League. Yeah. So it was a much more cynical take on how to use your powers to affect positive change in the world. And it really predated a popular series, very popular since it's part of the DC Studios lineup called The Authority by Warren Ellis and Brian Hitch, and then later on by Mark Millar and Frank Whiteley. So basically, Shadow Cabinet was the precursor to that. And so it really introduced, again, a more cynical approach to superheroism that I would liken to the very first season of the first Mission Impossible show going back to the 60s, which was pretty mean.
I like that analogy you gave with The Authority, because it really was sort of the precursor to that over at DC, that same concept of those superheroes that do the work that needs to get done. It's not glamorous. It's not pretty. They're not getting accolades. There will be no parades in the streets for what they're doing. And some of it's not very nice, but ultimately it's a numbers game of saving the world. I think in that series, you even learn that Dharma himself was responsible for the Big Bang for purposes of, I'm going to kill a few hundred to save millions. I mean, it's like that. Those are the stakes and odds that the Shadow Cabinet plays with.
That's absolutely true. And from his perspective, he was responsible because he could have prevented it from happening, but he did not. He let the Big Bang happen because the world needed superhumans, because those superhumans had to be around to prevent a future threat. And it would turn out that that future threat was him. And that was revealed in a two-part prestige format series called Milestone Forever, which
Yeah.
I think in the early aughts that Dwayne McDuffie wrote, that kind of tied a bow on the original core Milestone titles, and then would lead to the Dakota verse of Milestone superheroes and the DC Earth One heroes being in the same universe, which would later lead to Static being in the Teen Titans, Black Lightning meeting Static, Justice League fighting the Shadow Cabinet, and things of that nature.
And for you collectors out there, good luck finding that Milestone Forever. It's not easy.
Dude, listen.
All right. So, most recently, the incarnation of the Shadow Cabinet was in the Milestone 2.0's 30th anniversary special. It was kind of a conglomeration of the two prior Milestone universes, Earth M and Earth 93, coming together on a mission that Dharma sends them on. Tell us about this incarnation.
So this was written by Evan Narcisse. And so, yeah, to your point, you know, the Milestone 30th anniversary celebration was kind of a take on the theme Worlds Collide, which speaks to the Milestone DC crossover of the mid 90s, in which the Milestone heroes crossed over with the Superman family of heroes. And so the idea of these two different incarnations of the Milestone universe coming together just seemed to be thematically perfect. And that would open the door for what was to come next, as did the very last page of Icon versus Hardware issue 5. So
I
all
see here
roads were leading to the Shadow Cabinet.
all roads leading to the Shadow Cabinet. In this last panel, Dharma even goes so far as to give this ominous message that if the other Earth is anything like ours, probabilities you cannot yet conceive of are looming on the horizon. It
Right.
seems to be somewhat of a foreboding, foreshadowing statement. And the fact that he's looking at these four characters, Zombie, Death Wish, Donner, and Blitzen, who actually wasn't really all that participating in this 30th anniversary special, leads the question, are these characters going to show up in your new Shadow Cabinet iteration?
Right. You know, it's very interesting because, and we'll talk about this more, about what were the organic decisions behind who popped up in the Shadow Cabinet. It doesn't include a lot of the characters that the OG Milestone heads know. The two people that it includes, who are basically core, are Dharma, because he's the leader and the founder, and Iron Butterfly,
Yeah.
who's basically like his number one. I think a good analogy would be Queen Elizabeth and Sir Francis Walsingham. Sir Francis Walsingham was basically the spy master who protected the empire of Queen Elizabeth from both external and internal threats, right? A loyalty without question. That's who Iron Butterfly is to Dharma. Loyalty without question. Will deal with threats external and internal, and ruthlessly so.
So then we reach your series. We have your series literally picks up within months of what happened in Milestone 2.0 from last year. So can you give us the fans, or those who may not be familiar with or may need a refresher, what is the current status of the Milestone universe from 2.0?
Right. So basically, you know, the Milestone superhero universe was born from an incident called the Big Bang, which was a police action against a protest. And the protest was connected to Black Lives Matter. And the police used an experimental gas. That experimental gas contained a component called Q juice, which is an unstable version of plasma. And so on a quantum physics level, perception is reality. So when you got exposed to that gas, what your perception of yourself and your perception of whether you would live or die determined whether you did live or did die, and what kind of mutations you experienced that would lead to the creation of superhuman beings. And so we are now at the 1 year later mark, I would say, from that, because what happened was Superman's enemy Brainiac attempted to invade and destroy the Milestone Universe's Earth, and the heroes beat him back. But an event like that is going to have consequences on people in the world. So Shadow Cabinet 1 takes place 6 months after the end of Icon versus Hardware, which showed Brainiac's invasion. And basically, we're dealing with a new status quo of characters we know, but how did Brainiac's invasion affect everyone's lives? Because Brainiac is an alien artificial intelligence, right? So if we think about how in our lives, how the advent of artificial intelligence has changed life on Earth in so many ways, now multiply that by, say, 20, because you're literally talking about an alien artificial intelligence coming to wipe humanity out. So there's kind of like, I think, a metaphor there, and we're taking that metaphor and we're dealing with it literally.
Mm. All right. I mean, thank you for the recap. That was pretty thorough.
You're welcome.
All right, so let's jump into your version of Shadow Cabinet. Brilliant covers.
Yeah, I mean, listen, DC and Milestone went all out for this launch. This #1, that first cover there is by the first founder of Milestone, Dennis Cowan, inker John Stanisi, and colorist Chris Sotomayor. Chris also goes back to Milestone Generation 1. The second cover is by Nicholas Draper Ivy. I mean, are there really enough adjectives to describe his artistic skills? There really aren't. At the very least, he is the artist that defined Static for the 21st century in the series Static Season 1 and in Static Shadows of Dakota. And then the third one is by Sean Gordon Murphy, well-known illustrator in comics, most well-known for Batman White Knight. And so his approach to this cover was basically an homage to the backing boards of the 1993 polybagged editions of Hardware #1, Static #1, Icon #1, and Blood Syndicate #1. They were illustrated, and they had a very specific gritty style. They were done by Dennis Cowan. And so Sean Gordon Murphy did an homage to that, where he actually brought the visceral and aggressive nature of Dennis's aesthetic, but made it for now. And so it's really a beautiful trio of covers to commemorate this first issue, and I just couldn't be more thrilled.
Yeah, I love the fact that it says Milestone at the top as well.
It's amazing. Yeah. And it just has that old school aesthetic where you have the bar with the heroes on the side, but then somehow Static is kind of like 3-dimensional. So he's coming out from behind Hardware, because, it's interesting. Hardware was the first Milestone character published, but due to the Static Shock cartoon, Static is basically what humanity understands as Milestone's flagship character, right?
Right.
Because he is the one that got to a cartoon, and that cartoon influenced 2 generations of people. That cartoon saved lives. It literally changed people's lives. And there is no Miles Morales without Static, which means there is no Into the Spider-Verse without Static Shock.
Right. Absolutely. That cover C by Sean Gordon Murphy, if that is released as a promotional poster, hook a brother up, because
listen, get in line. If that is released as a promotional poster, get in line because I would have to frame that. I mean, that's just amazing.
Yeah. All right, so let's jump into your story. One of the first things that's established is that Edwin Alva has disappeared.
Right.
We don't know what's happened to him. It's assumed that he's dead.
Right.
When last I recall seeing him in Hardware Season 2, he was under arrest by the federal authorities for various crimes, and now he's disappeared.
Right. So basically, he's a billionaire industrialist. So I would say think of Edwin Alva as a fusion of like Richard Branson, Peter Thiel, and Elon Musk, right? That's who he is in the Milestone universe. And even though there is a criminal investigation, he's obviously not in a cell anyplace because he's a billionaire, right? And when we last saw him in Icon versus Hardware, he actually had a new experiment that he was going to set up so that he could have mutated superpowered beings under his employ. Now, that was 6 months ago, right? Now, again, things have changed. And so he's disappeared. No one knows what the status of him is. Is he alive? Is he dead? What's going on? So one of the things that Alva did was he created a consortium of like-minded, influential people around the globe. That consortium is called System. And now 6 months later, business is the same as usual. Business has actually exploited the Brainiac invasion by market manipulation. So basically, you have the nations of the world and they're increasing their defenses. You have people who have been traumatized by it. They don't want to deal with real life. They want to escape into virtual reality or whatever television show they want to see. They want to escape into something immersive. So basically, we're learning that profits have gone up. There's an empty seat where Edwin Alva would be sitting, and one of the members of System is upset because they have not managed to get any artifacts of Brainiac, right? Not only have they not managed to get any artifacts, but apparently there are people who are beating them to these artifacts. And it's pissing this guy off, right?
So
that's the situation when we enter this story.
And power abhors a vacuum, right?
100%.
So we have the power, the vacuum left by the absence of Edwin Alva, and who slides in to fill the void?
Yes. Angela Alva, who is the sister of Edwin Alva, right? So she comes in and she's taking the family seat. She doesn't walk in there asking for permission. And just so we're clear, this is happening on a plane, right? Because billionaires aren't meeting in a restaurant. They're meeting someplace exotic. So I really wanted to start with a James Bond kind of cold open. So this is a private jet that's like 25,000 feet in the air, right? So Angela Alva got there because she has a teleporter that works for her named Transit. And old Milestone head should recognize that name, right? And so she just rolls up on the plane and she's like, you know what? You guys are really boring. Like your thinking is very two-dimensional and we need an upgrade of thinking around here. And someone interrupts her and she just shoots them in the head.
Disintegrates them.
And then she just walks over to her seat and she assumes control.
And what she shoots him with is that thing that you see on her arm, which is one of Hardware's gauntlets.
Yes, it is, isn't it?
That she has access to Curtis Metcalf's technology that, it was built with Alva Industries tech. So they apparently now she has access to it.
Yes. And let's also think about this. in the spirit of one of the Milestone founders who is no longer with us, Dwayne McDuffie, who created a concept for Marvel called Damage Control with an artist named Ernie Colon. You know, these superheroes fight and they leave pieces of things all over the place.
Yeah.
All you have to do is just reassemble some of those pieces and you got Iron Man's gauntlet, or you have Hardware's gauntlet. Right?
Yeah. All right. So then the next thing we see, she immediately gets on the move. She's now declared herself the new head of system, new head of Alva Industries.
Yes.
And she starts recruiting. And the first person she chooses to recruit is Tiffany Evans, a.k.a. Technique. Why don't we explain to the folks what this is all about?
So again, Tiffany Evans is a character that goes to the original Milestone, but for new readers, she is a Black woman. She's a scientist, technology, inventions. And what happened was she was an employee of Edwin Alva. And because Edwin Alva framed one of his employees named Curtis Metcalf for the Big Bang, basically stating that the gas that was used during the Big Bang was unstable. It was unstable because Curtis Metcalf, as an employee, was irresponsible. So Curtis Metcalf is basically a fugitive for multiple counts of manslaughter for the people who died the night of the Big Bang. And so Tiffany was an employee of Alva Industries who went public on the news and said that Curtis was innocent and that Alva was framing him. And so Edwin Alva decided to reward her disloyalty by attempting to kill her and sent a superpowered mercenary after her. And she used some of the hardware technology to save herself, along with help from Curtis Metcalf as Hardware and an ally of hers, Professor Barracky Young, who used to be the girlfriend of Curtis. But the thing is, you know, again, we're thinking about this from a real world dynamic. So she survives that assassination attempt, but Edwin Alva is out there in the world. So what's he going to do? He's going to blacklist her so that she can't get a job anywhere in the tech sector, right? And look, let's be fair. The tech sector, as we know it, is not the most open-minded sector when it comes to women, when it comes to people from different ethnic backgrounds. But she's been totally blacklisted. So for these 6 months, you know, she's basically just been living off whatever money she has, trying to get a job. But here's Angela Alva, who rolls up to her. And when she hears that name, she's like, okay, you're an enemy, right? And she's basically like, I don't want to hear what you have to say. But Angela Alva's like, listen, my family did you wrong. There is no way to repay the debt, but let me take a shot at it, right? I'm going to give you a job, top ranking job. You're going to have an 8-figure salary. You're going to have points in the company. You're going to have royalties for anything that you invent for Alva Industries. And for people that know Hardware, she basically got the deal from Angela Alva that Curtis Metcalf wanted from Edwin Alva.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know what I'm saying? And we're intentionally kind of like making a commentary about how Black women treat their own differently in business, right? And so she's trying to make amends for something her family did. And she's like, listen, it's a new day in Alva Industries. Like, come with me. Let's own the future together, you know? And that's a tough offer to say no to. And besides, Tiffany's dog trusts Angela. So come on. If that's not the best endorsement, what is?
Yeah, I mean, I love how you pointed that out. Like, that was literally the deal that Curtis Metcalf
right
asked Edwin Alva, and he's like, "No,
right,
you're beneath me. I made you. You
right.
What you have is enough."
Right.
and that set him on this whole path of becoming hardware.
100%.
She can't say no to that.
It would be tough to do that.
It would be tough to do that. All right. So, just to recap who she is she also, for those who don't know, has another persona known as Technique,
Yes.
which is kind of like she's a brilliant inventor herself, and
Yes.
she has a suit of armor, much the way I don't want to say Ironheart, but she has a suit of armor, much like Hardware, and has her own persona. In fact, at the time, Milestone even flaunted the idea of possibly giving her own spin-off series, if I'm not mistaken.
That was talked about back in the day. Yeah. And it's so funny. You mentioned Ironheart. That's just another example again of how Milestone was far ahead of other companies by decades, right? Because this was the first time that we actually saw a Black woman wearing an armor as a hero that was originally the identity of a man.
Yeah, except it was also her brilliance in inventing the technology herself.
Yep, that's right. She made some innovations on the design because she's an inventor.
Yeah. Any possibility that we will see Technique in this upcoming Shadow Cabinet series?
We'll talk about that in a few months.
All right.
But this is only the beginning of you seeing what Tiffany's ultimate role in this story is. So anyone that gets introduced, I guarantee you they have a purpose.
Eclectic Birdie asks, so she predates Steele's niece, Natasha.
100%. What? Yeah, it's interesting. Tiffany Evans and Natasha Irons, I believe, were created around the same time, but Natasha wouldn't wear an armor until years later. Right?
Later, yeah.
So Tiffany as Technique definitely predates Natasha, who ended up having multiple names. I think now she's Steele, but in an earlier iteration, I think her name was Starlight, funny enough, which was the name of a Milestone character. So the answer to that question is she 100% predates Natasha Irons insofar as a Black woman as an armored hero.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Kobe Brewster says, the original Milestone was so far ahead, it's not even funny.
Kobe knows. Those are facts. Those are facts. Things that companies are patting themselves on the back for in the 21st century, Milestone did in the 20th century.
30 years ago.
100%.
That's why I always give respect to Milestone, because it is still the standard for comics to this day.
Yes, indeed.
All right. But let's brings us to our main protagonist in this series, at least seemingly.
Yes.
Is Rocket.
Yes.
I don't see Icon.
You do not.
What's going on?
Well, first let's talk about Rocket, right? So Rocket is a 17-year-old named Raquel Irvin. She and her mom live in an economically disadvantaged neighborhood called Paris Island. We'll be talking about Paris Island again. And what happened was she and her friends were on a drive in a wealthy neighborhood in Dakota. I think it's called Westwood or Westview. And her friends, basically wanted to steal some stuff from some rich person's house. And she just wanted a computer. She just wanted a typewriter, right? Because she's a writer, and she would one day like to be a professional writer. And they stumble upon the home of this Black man named Augustus Freeman, who is a wealthy attorney. But it turns out he is also a superhuman being. He's an alien who's been living on Earth since slavery times. And her encountering him totally reframes possibility for her, right? Because there's a super-powered black man on Earth. He can fly, bullets bounce off his chest, he has super strength. And she starts thinking, this guy could change the world.
Yeah.
Why is he not doing that? Why
Why is
did I
that?
just stumble upon this guy? Why is he not out there saving the world? And she challenges him. She says, hey, like, you need to get off your ass, because I don't care what planet or galaxy you came from, you're black. You live here and you're black, and there are people that are suffering, and you have the power to change things. So she forces him into heroism, and then she decides to be his sidekick. So he took on the identity of Icon, and she became Rocket. And they went at the world hard in trying to deal with the drug trade, the gun trade, and everything. And you can imagine people in powerful positions were not cool with these two superheroes running around upsetting their balance of power worldwide. So they sent a lot of people, a lot of superpowered people after Icon and Rocket, and they barely failed. And then what happens is, after the Brainiac invasion, Icon has left Earth, and we don't know why yet. But basically, Icon has left Earth. Hardware is no longer an active vigilante. There are other superpowered beings who have just stopped the fight. And so Rocket is the only superhero now. And she is out there every day and every night fighting the fight. She doesn't go to school anymore. She doesn't hang out with her friends on the weekends. She is the only superhero. And the core narrative of this story is that she's writing a letter to her mother, right? Who she hasn't seen in 6 months. And she's basically telling her mother what it is like being out there fighting the fight, and how it's taking a toll on her. But she learned courage from her mother. And someone's got to save the world. And if it's one day and one night at a time, then it's going to be her. So that's what's happening now. That's where she's at.
Well, she's not entirely alone.
Not entirely.
We see that she has resources available to her. She has this plane, this ship that she's flying into, very advanced technology.
Yep.
And she's talking to someone through a little mic, and you don't know who that is initially. By the way, this is like one of my favorite panels here. This artwork is absolutely fantastic. You have artist Daryl Banks and Akon. I can't pronounce his last name.
Adagun Ilhan.
Adagun Ilhan. Who did this segment? Was this Daryl Banks?
This is Daryl Banks. Daryl Banks starts off the book, and first off, Daryl is a veteran in comics. He is the co-creator of the Green Lantern called Kyle Rayner. He's drawn all the major DC superheroes.
He created Parallax.
Say it again.
He created Parallax as well.
Yes, he co-created Parallax. He most recently did work in the 0 Hour 30th anniversary celebration book that DC did. And so Daryl and I have known each other for probably 30 years, and I've always wanted to work with him. So, one of the dharma of Team Shadowcabinet is DC Comics editor Marquise Draper. And so when we were talking about, who should do the book for, who should draw Shadowcabinet, because it's an event series, at first he said, well, we have Daryl Banks and we have Adagun Ilhan. And I had to choose. And I was like, dude, what are you, crazy? But then he said, okay, we'll just have them both in the book. And I'm like, okay, let's go. So we had to figure out how to make it work so that it would be organic, having two artists sharing one book. And so Daryl kicks off the book. And, one of the things I love about this page, showing Rocket as this person with agency, and this is something that I mentioned on the socials recently, is Rocket's hair. Yeah. So, one of the things in comics is, you know, I'm a writer, but the first thing that anyone sees in comic books is art, right? So there has to be a visual communication. So if you're familiar with Rocket, you need something to visually tell you time has passed.
Mm-hmm.
And her hairstyle, her hair is grown. She has a totally different hairstyle now. She has braids, right? And so that's a visual indicator that time has passed for her. But also, it really speaks to the fact that, we wanted to give her an authentic look. So Marquise, found different hairstyles as I kind of described what I was hoping we could do with her. And, this is the kind of hairstyle that you would see like on a young sister these days, right? And it's very important to have that, verisimilitude, that kind of appearance and truth. It immediately makes her more identifiable and believable to people. So having Rocket have this new hairstyle, just something small like that is really big and I love it. But yeah, this introduction by Daryl is just exquisite. And, any writer will tell you that artists make them look better. Daryl and Adagoon are definitely making me look better. And Daryl is one of the best storytellers in comic books. That's just a fact.
Yeah, he's really. Ooh, he's needs to get more flowers because he's really very talented.
The man, the way he leads your eye through this, it's stunning.
So we find out who is the man in the chair.
Yeah.
Who is the man in the chair?
So it is Curtis Metcalf, formerly Hardware, and he has this underground complex, and he is basically, it's funny, I've heard different analogies. The one that I kind of joke on in this story is the Alfred to Rocket as Batman. Someone said a real good one. It's one of the Facebook followers I have named J Powerhouse and Scott. He basically said Curtis is the Q to Rocket's James Bond, which I thought was really great. And one of the things you find out in this conversation is that when Rocket was out there in the skies alone, at some point, he helped her. He came out of his hole to help her. And that's how they started this partnership. But just so we're clear, like, this is Rocket's operation, right? Curtis is support, even though he's twice her age and his ego is twice the size of hers, right? But if you know Raquel Irvin, she's an alpha. You know what I mean? Like, you are not her boss, okay? So they have a very interesting dynamic of respect and tension. And basically, we get a little glimpse on these screens of this kid who's shooting lightning someplace. There's a neighborhood with a wall tag that said Blood Syndicate rules here. So it's kind of like there are these little things that are going on in the universe with some characters you may remember. But the big issue here is that, again, when Rocket was with Icon, they went at trying to fix the world in a very overt way. And the world will not tolerate that, right? So Curtis's thinking is, you've got to do it through the invisible systems. You want to destroy a drug lord? You do it through their banks. How do they get their money? That's what you do. You stop the flow of their money and you will impact their empire. So their mission is to basically, Rocket's mission is to save people, and Curtis's mission is to beat bad guys in covert ways. So their missions dovetail, right? So they have a very interesting alliance going on. And it totally wasn't expected because, like, Curtis hates Icon.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Vagrant just mentioned, the Icon versus Hardware series in which, Curtis goes back in time and tries to undo, certain events in history. I don't want to spoil that because it was really
Yeah.
dope.
Yeah.
But you know, he left that whole experience with some scars, because he kind of messed up,
Yeah.
and he damn near destroyed the universe. Um,
Exactly.
so
Exactly.
is that going to play a part? Because one of the things you said was he was formerly hardware. Is that part of the reason why he's now playing a less active role and being more of a man in the chair and being support to Rocket superhero because of those scars from his last adventure?
Well, there's two reasons. Number one, for a very practical reason, and this is something that, Marquise and I talked about, is the man's a fugitive.
Is a fugitive, yeah.
The man is a fugitive because a billionaire told the world that he is responsible for the deaths of a number of people who were exposed to a gas during a protest. So he's a fugitive, number one. Number two, he respects this 17-year-old girl, right? Everyone else checked out. Everyone got traumatized or affected by the Brainiac invasion, but she's out there doing the job. He respects her. And he's like, if you're going to be out there, you're going to need help or you're going to be dead in a week. So I'm going to make sure you're not dead in a week. Right. And on another layer, he's giving himself a purpose.
Right.
Right.
So shortly after this, we're introduced to another character, and Anansi, who
Yes.
previously was only introduced in the Static Shock cartoon. And last year, Milestone brought him into the fore, into the
Yes.
real world of the Milestone Universe in
Yes.
his own series,
Yeah.
written by Evan Narcisse.
Yes.
What's interesting, what I point out, is that this introductory scene where you have in the comic takes place on a train.
Yeah.
And I remembered, because I've been rewatching these Static Shock cartoons, because they're now on the I think it's on Cinemax, whatever it's called, HBO Max.
Yeah.
Max. And I remembered that's where Anansi was actually introduced in the cartoon, was also on a train.
See, that's crazy. Now, I will gladly take credit for things that I intend. That one I did not. So I love the cosmic symmetry of that. And I remember I watched all the Static Shock episodes, and I remember that. So that's kind of wild. The reason I said it on a train was, again, the train setting is because a group of billionaires have been brought together. There's a host that's there in hologram form, and there's an artifact that is available for them to bid on. And the artifact is part of the head of Brainiac. And the bidding starts at $10 billion. Right. And I was thinking again, okay, what are rich people really going to meet? Right. What would be cool? What would be real world cool? And I was thinking, hey, what if they just bought a speed train and they were constantly in movement? They were never just stationary. So the same way you had system on a plane, 25,000 feet in the air, you have these billionaires on a speed train going at 220 miles per hour through God knows where. And that's where they're having this conversation. And so Anansi infiltrated that meeting, right? And then he reveals himself. And, it's interesting because one of the things with the Shadow Cabinet, and we can talk about that more in depth as we go, is this story is basically the culmination of the big Milestone story that started in 2020. And so I really had to be thoughtful of the work that Brandon Thomas did on Hardware Season 1, the work that Evan Narcisse did on Static Team Up Anansi, the work that Reggie Hudlin did on Icon and Rocket, the work that Jeffrey Thorne did on Blood Syndicate. So we really had to kind of naturally continue these characters, but also do them in a way in which, if this is the first time you're meeting Anansi, he's a distinctive character to you. right? And so I wanted to think about what would make him distinctive. One thing is he is, he was born in Ghana. He's from Africa, right? And he is the superhero of Africa. So it occurred to me that the children look up to him, right? And he probably tells them stories about his adventures, right? And this is going to be one of them. So I thought, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I thought that was a very distinctive way to introduce him and speak to his personality as this admired hero of his homeland.
It's
and
amazing.
If you know the name Anansi, Anansi is the name of the African spider god. And so, I wanted the manifestations of his powers to involve a spider language, similar to how they've been in past iterations of Anansi, but I wanted to kind of make a mystical Spider-Man.
What are his power sets for those who don't know?
I mean, it's really multivaried, but he is basically kind of like the recipient of mystical abilities from, past gods. He is named after the spider god, right? These powers are manifested through objects or himself. He is a person of superhuman agility, right? And so again, I wanted to take a few liberties, but I wanted to communicate to you the mythological origin of who he is. That, kind of like how comic books used to be. When you think about the 60s Marvel comics, these comics were written in ways that kids would like go to encyclopedias or dictionaries and try to look up unstable molecules and things like that. So if this is your first time encountering Anansi, you could look that name up and you could start to learn about, oh, okay, this is where he comes from,
Yeah. One of the things you mentioned was the static team up Anansi series that came out. For those of you who want more about this character, I highly recommend that series. Kobe Brewster makes a very good point on his power set. He says it's kind of a reality warper illusion. I remember we interviewed Evan Narcisse about that book, and he had said in the dialogue of the story that he tells stories, and what are storytelling but the fabrication of new realities by those stories. So that is kind of it's weird. You can't really pin down his powers because they're very esoteric.
Yes.
But the truism there is that he is the god of he has powers of illusion, and he also has reality warping powers. So it gives you as a writer a lot to play with and work with. So that's kind of cool.
100%. But you also don't want to make them a godlike being. They have to be finite. So here, the reality warping powers are shown through him removing the guise of like a young African billionaire and then revealing himself as this costumed hero of Ghana.
Yeah.
And as a member of the Shadow Cabinet.
All right. So joins Rocket and him join the fight.
Yeah.
I see here Rocket's fighting this panther creature. I'm just going to assume that Milestone is make a declaration that they have the best superheroes, and they're knocking out the Black Panther.
Oh man,
I'm not sure what you're rolling with that, Joe.
Oh my goodness. Listen, no shade against T'Challa. I promise, no shade. This is just some, it turned up. Adagoon drew it because basically all of these billionaires have like super powered bodyguards. And you see throughout the story, they're transforming into different creatures. So one of them transformed into a Black Panther. But no, there's no shade against Marvel. That's just something.
Some one of them just happens to turn into a Black Panther, and the Milestone characters kick the Black Panther's ass. I'm just saying, I'm just throwing it out there, Joe.
Listen, well, I will say this. No one kicks Rocket's ass in the Shadow Cabinet comic. And we'll
Look,
just leave it at that, right?
anybody who knows me knows I'm the biggest Black Panther fan, but I ain't gonna get mad at it because Milestone, and for me, Milestone is it. So, yeah, no shade taken by
No
me.
shade to T'Challa.
All right, so here's the thing. I'm still trying to figure out if my man Curtis Metcalf is retired.
Yeah.
I love this scene because you see his hall of armors.
Yeah.
Much like you've seen plenty of times with Tony Stark and
Yeah.
Iron Man. But what's interesting is that the armor to the far left, I've seen 2, 3, and 4, but I have never ever seen the armor to the far left. And that's the one that Curtis is presently staring at in this picture. That seems to be a new armor we've never seen before. Is that something we're going to see again in the series?
We'll talk about that in a few months. But suffice it to say, you know, basically think about Curtis like, you know, hardware was basically the manifestation of his purpose. He created the hardware identity so that he could wage war on Alva. Right. And right now he's a fugitive, but there's that itch that he can't scratch.
Right.
Right. And so that's what this is. And the big question is, how long is it going to be before he scratches it? So
that is the most radical design. It's completely different than any design you've ever seen him do before. So you talk about scratching itches. I have an itch to scratch because I want to see that armor. I'm just
all right. The genius of Darryl Banks once again, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm telling you. So Darryl made this design. That's too. So yes. Darryl made the design for this as well.
Yes.
Oh wow! So I know it's gonna be fire. Shout out to Darryl Banks.
Yeah.
And then finally, we see, the introduction of the quote unquote shadow cabinet.
Yes.
The leadership. You've got Dharma and Iron Butterfly.
Yeah.
How much more can we expect in terms of the expansion of this roster?
I don't want to.
Old people.
You know, this is what I will tell you is that what the shadow cabinet means, and it has a double meaning. The second meaning won't be revealed until the end of this story. The only thing I could tell you is there are different ways to solve a problem. And one is vertical, which is straight line, like there's a problem, I'm going to solve it this way. And one is lateral, which is you come at the problem from different angles and then you go to it. This is going to be a lateral approach from Dharma's perspective of how to save the world. And the previous shadow cabinet was a vertical approach. So I'll say that for you, but the question will be answered. And this is where artist Adagoon Ilhan comes into play, because basically as of the train scene in the story with the introduction of Anansi and Iron Butterfly leading you to Shadowspire, which is where the Shadow Cabinet resides, their headquarters, that's Adagoon Ilhan. And whenever you would like go back to Curtis, that would be Darryl Banks. So that's kind of like how we did it. And, Dharma is East Asian descent, right? And so Shadowspire, which is their headquarters, you don't know where it is. And it's very surreal, and visually it communicates aesthetics of Buddhist ideals, right? And so, really think of it in the way that you would think of the art of Salvador Dali, right? Or MC Escher, right? It's not simple as this is a floor, this is a wall, this is a tree, right? The environment is absolutely surreal. And that was one of the things that I wanted to play with, Rocket being thrust into this truly alien landscape with these people. And so the shadow cabinet is out of her depth. 100%.
Yeah, one of the things you said that was kind of poignant. You said there are different ways to approach a problem.
Yes.
One of the ways that was manifested in the original series was the concept of the Star Chamber. You have the Shadow Cabinet and you have the Star Chamber.
Yes.
Both seemingly going for the same goal, but from different angles and different motivations. Will we see the Star Chamber's return in this series?
You won't see a Star Chamber, but what you will see are different people trying to solve problems through extreme solutions.
Okay.
And, when you're talking about the Shadow Cabinet, Dharma can see multiple futures. So the perspective of someone who can see multiple futures and is trying to ensure the one future is a paradox, right? In one sense, in the present moment, and every moment we live in is in the present moment, right? Like now is now, and now is now, and now is now. So in the present moment, he has agency. He can manipulate events. But in the macro of time, he's a servant. He's a servant to the flow of time. And even whatever he does, that was preordained from a cosmic perspective. So he has a binary perspective, and it's not easy to be him, right? And so when we get to the end of this and we see what Dharma and other people are willing to do to ensure the one future, I think that will make it clear to you what a Star Chamber would really be like.
In terms of antagonists, we have System, potentially another Alva. We don't know yet. We've got Dharma himself within the Shadow Cabinet.
Mm-hmm.
But then you introduce this other character, Sanction.
Yeah, Sanction. Okay. So
have we seen this person before?
Yes. There is a 90s Milestone version of Sanction who is introduced in Hardware. And so Sanction is one of my favorite characters from the Milestone universe. Rocket is my favorite character from the Milestone universe. And Rocket is one of my 10 favorite superheroes, period.
Yeah.
Sanction is one of my favorite heroes from the Milestone universe. And as he was an ex-spy who became a mercenary. So once again, Milestone ahead of the curve. Basically, he was a Black Nick Fury. Back in the 90s, the original version of Sanction wore an eye patch, which again predated the Samuel Jackson Nick Fury in the Ultimates comic
Universe,
would lead to the Samuel Jackson Nick Fury in the Marvel Cinematic Universe by more than a decade, right? So, this Sanction, he's a mercenary. And he has a history that deals with a lot of covert intelligence, dirty tricks, bad stuff worldwide. But right here, basically, someone, and you don't know who it is, but if you can pick up the hint, you know who it is. Someone has basically hired Sanction to take out the Blood Syndicate. And the Blood Syndicate is a superpowered gang that has taken noble control, not totalitarian control, but noble control of Paris Island, where Rocket and her mother live.
The new Tortuga, as defined by Jeffrey Thorne. Shout out to Jeffrey Thorne. I think I saw him in it.
Yes. Shout out to him. Again, it was very important. It was very important for Milestone and DC and the team to really make this a culmination event. It was important to me as someone who is a friend and admirer of the various writers, Brandon Thomas, Vita Ayala, Nicholas Draper Ivey, Jeffrey Thorne, Evan Narcisse, Reggie Hudlin, that this story honored their stories, right? And is a natural extension.
I'm tripping out because I'm hearing you read through this list of names. Reggie Hudlin, Nicholas Draper Ivey, Vita Ayala, Brandon Thomas, Jeffrey Thorne. I mean, Leon Chills. Just
Leon Chills.
You guys at Milestone assembled just the top tier of talent to work on these books.
Yes,
it does my heart proud to see these characters in such great hands, and I include you obviously in that, Joe, as well.
Thank you.
And I love the fact that you're one of us, in that you are a fan of the Milestone universe. I mean, you grew up with Milestone just like I did. Milestone made you.
100%. I'm in comics because of Milestone, and so to be able to come back home as a writer and to honor the legacy, and if I want to get sappy for a minute, Dwayne McDuffie meant a lot to me. So, listen, if he's in heaven looking down and he could just say, not bad, I'd be good with that.
Yeah. I feel you. I had a moment last week with Dennis Cowan.
Yes.
I wouldn't be sitting in this chair talking to you and these fine people right now if it wasn't for Dennis Cowan. And that's 100% facts.
Same here. For those of you who saw my video on YouTube of my career spotlight panel at San Diego Comic-Con, Dennis was there, and Dennis was there because I invited him, and I invited him because I wanted to give him his flowers in person.
Yeah.
Milestone gave me purpose. Those are the facts. So
absolutely. As Richard says, shout out to the goats. All right, so why don't we talk about what you have upcoming?
Sure.
Here's your issue 2.
Yes.
Who's on the left here?
So on the left that is Sanction, but that's what you wear when you're gonna go and you've got to take out a gang of superpowered people. You don't wear what you're wearing when you just got to take out regular people. So that is Sanction, and he is armored up
against the Blood Syndicate at the bottom of the page.
Yes. So I guarantee you we're turning up the temperature with this one. So, one of the things that I think was fun to do was to kind of introduce him on the last page of the first issue and then make him a big character in issue 2 for a number of reasons. Number one, because I do not take it for granted that comics cost a lot of money. There's a lot of comics out there. There's a lot of entertainment out there. And as a writer, it is my responsibility to compel people to come back for the next issue.
Right.
Compel you. And I felt like what we did, the team and I, leading to the introduction of Sanction, makes you come back, right? And, in a way, I don't think it was intentional, but it turned out to be a nod to the introduction of Wolverine, who is introduced on the very last page of the Incredible Hulk 180. Mm-hmm. And then his major appearance was Incredible Hulk 181. So that was part of it. And part of it is, for practical reasons, you want to give the readers a reason to keep coming back. Every issue, they need at least one reason to come back. So the introduction of Sanction is a reason. A more important reason is the reintroduction of Static, and where he's at 6 months after the invasion of Brainiac. And I won't tell you much right now, but you see he's got a different look.
He does. In fact, that's actually that T-shirt is specifically from the Static Shock cartoon.
Yeah, and the hat is from 1993 Static.
Right. It's a combination of different
eras. So, he's not wearing blue and yellow anymore. He's wearing black and white.
Right.
I dare say that is a metaphor for his perspective on life now. So when you see him, he's not the same Virgil Ovid Hawkins you left.
When's the next issue?
Yeah, it's in 3.5 weeks.
All right, man. All right, you're making brother
Yeah,
wait. All right, that's cool. That's cool. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
right.
So it's going to be interesting. So these are the covers for issue 3. So every A cover is drawn by Dennis Cowan. The cover for issue 1 was inked by John Stanisi. The covers for 2 and 3 and 4, which we'll see, are inked by Prentice Rollins. And then the variant covers are all by Nicholas Draper Ivy, full illustration. So what we're seeing on the left is Angela Alva has captured hardware, it seems.
And that's his old outfit. I want to see the new outfit done by Daryl Banks.
It says, I mean, I didn't say there was going to be a new outfit that was going to, I don't know, maybe, but this is very important, right? Because they have a major conversation to have.
Yeah.
And that conversation, you're going to learn the history of the Alvas, Edwin and Angela, and you're going to learn why this conversation needed to happen. And it's a big one.
What
and
I'd
you're
like
going
to
to find out what Angela has a business agenda and she has an emotional agenda. You're going to find out what her emotional agenda is. And what I would caution you to do is don't judge her based off of the very first thing you saw her do.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. I didn't know. I didn't know about Rufus. You know, it's funny. I read The Master of Kung Fu Comics in the 4th grade, but I think when I came on, I think Gene Day was doing it. So I may have missed Rufus. So totally understood. Thank you, Wraith X7, for the correction. I totally get it. I didn't know about him having the eye patch, but yeah.
Yeah, I just found out about that character like early this year.
I love this. I love that super deep dive. So much respect, much respect. And then the second cover, huh?
So blackcomiclords, man, that's how we do.
Listen, I always learn something talking to y'all and talking to the crew here. And then the second cover is, Nicholas Draper Ivy's interpretation of hardware. If you look at the graffiti on the bike,
yeah,
you kind of see some names you might recognize from Milestone history. And I think it's just cool, like seeing Curtis Metcalf like that, because Curtis Metcalf has different sides to him as a human being. So I thought that was really great.
Oh, it says Cowan and McDuffie. Look at that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. This is 1993. That's dope, man.
Listen, respect.
Yeah, much respect. And I love the fact that his motorcycle helmet kind of is reminiscent of his hardware helmet as well.
Yeah.
That's dope.
Yeah.
I would be very curious to see if Angela offers Curtis the deal that he just offered Tiffany, the deal that he want. Remember that deal that you asked my brother and it caused you to basically start an entire war? How about I reoffer that and throw it in additional 5%?
We're gonna find out. Oh, that's interesting. Can we get a Doc Bright Easter egg? Issue 4. Yeah, I think Marquise and I have been talking, and I think you'll see something that everyone will appreciate in issue 4. So we'll get there.
That thank you for asking that, Richard.
Yeah,
Doc Bright has been a topic of discussion here at Black Comic Lords. Not enough recognition has gone in noting his passing, but more important, his contributions to comics.
Well, one of the things that we must take into account is, agita really comes from expecting other people to do the right thing.
Yes.
And when we take the responsibility of doing the right thing into our own hands, it changes reality. It changes our mental and psychological and emotional reality. And so we as a community are acknowledging Mark. Mark was a seminal artist, a good human being. He loved God and he loved his mother. And it doesn't get any better than that. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Mark, because he drew the comic that I saw on a newsstand that made me want to be a part of Milestone. Mark drew that. And I never got to tell him that. That's a tragedy. So we are acknowledging him, and our work is as much of a thank you to the legacy of his work. You know, Milestone, Milestone's a multi-generational family. Once you're part of family, you're always part of the family. That bond is not broken, even if you pass beyond the mortal coil.
That's what's up, man.
Yeah.
Shout out to Mark M.D. Bright.
Yep.
All right. Another one of Milestone Goats putting a little work on an upcoming cover.
That's the cover for the 4th issue. Did you see the full color version yet?
No. Has it come out yet?
It's out there. It's out there. It's on my feeds. Yeah, there's a full color version. But it's great to see this. These are the raw Dennis Cowan pencils, man. Like, just look at that. I mean, as we all know, there was a recent Kickstarter that successfully funded for a book called Graphic Samurai: The Art of Dennis Cowan. And I was honored to have an interview in there where I spoke about his work. And you don't have to see his signature to know he drew this. Right. If you know art, if you know comics, you know that Dennis Cowan drew this. And you see these lines, and they have such energy and emotion. And when you think about the first issue of Hardware from 1993, which there we go. That is the full cover by Dennis Cowan, Prentice Rollins, and Chris Sotomayor, which is The Return of Heroes. And that's all that I'll say about that. But, going back to Hardware #1, which is an unbeatable #1 issue for a superhero comic in the North American comic book industry forever and ever. There is something so urgent about Dennis's artwork in that was more urgent than any Batmans he did before that. It was more urgent than The Question, because Milestone meant more. So when you see his pencils, and you see his love of these characters that he helped bring into being, you know that they mean more. Yeah. So, so look, man, like I really lucked out. Like, I've got Dennis doing all the A covers, Nick doing all the B covers. It's like, all of us really came together to make this one to remember. I have compared it to grand stories like Kingdom Come and The Golden Age that DC did about the Justice Society by James Robinson and Paul Smith, Civil War by Mark Millar and Steve McNiven. And I mean that. The tone of this and how it approaches character, I wanted it to be naturalistic. And so I was definitely inspired by those stories. And when this is over, I want it to be something that we can look at and say, okay, yeah, we have our grand tale.
Right.
I would want this to sit on a bookshelf proudly in people's collections with those stories, and see our fall and see our rise, and see that that heroism is inevitable. even and especially in the worst of times.
Ooh, next 4 years are going to be rough, but hopefully comics like this will help me get through it.
we will be here. And that is it.
All right. So here's the thing. What else do we have here?
Oh man. Well, listen, how do I compare to Letha Martinez?
This has been the end of our Black Comic Creator Appreciation Week.
Yeah.
You are the capping off, our salute to Black comic creators. I wanted to thank you for being here, Joe. And for those who may have missed any of the prior episodes, they're up on our YouTube page. Please check them out. This is going to be a monthly series. I believe Joe wants to do this every Sunday after the release of each episode of Shadow Cabinet.
That's right. That's right. This is going to be a regular experience for us and for the readers, and and then we can see things as they progress, and we can talk about them, and we can talk about connective threads going backwards. But yeah, let's make this a regular discussion as we go on the journey together.
Well, speaking of discussion, there were some questions that were in the chat that I think people had some.
Oh, I'd answer questions.
All right, Dr. Wizard, will we see a Milestone animated or live action movie?
I know that it is part of a plan. Some work has been done on it. That's all I know. So more, specifically animated. What we also know is that Michael B. Jordan is a producer on a static live action movie. And so I want to see those things as much as the fans do. Listen, Milestone should be animated, especially when you think about the legacy of Static Shock.
Yeah.
And I mean, live action, come on, who doesn't want to see static, right? And, I want to put stuff like numbers aside, because numbers are not the biggest metric of concern. So when you talk about a film like The Blue Beetle, introducing Jaime Reyes and his family, that film had such heart. I don't care how much money it made or didn't make. And I'm not a shareholder at Warner Brothers Discovery, so I don't have to care. What I care about is that story had such heart. That kid had such heart. His family was so cool. I am 55 years old. I've seen a ton of superhero movies. That was the first time I saw one. And when I walked out of it, I said, I want to read a Blue Beetle comic.
Yeah.
I said, I don't want to leave this kid and his family. I really like them. I want to spend some more time with them. I want to buy a Blue Beetle comic, right? So I feel like Blue Beetle showed us that young, superpowered heroism in live action format is potent and powerful and needed. And so to me, static is inevitable. It's not a question mark for me. It's an exclamation point. And we just have to get to the future in which we will see Virgil Hawkins and his full family on screen. One of the things that I love about the comics, unlike the cartoon, and the cartoon is, of course, important, but in the cartoon, Virgil's mom was dead. And they made that work, and they made that have importance. But in the comics, it's a full nuclear family.
Yeah.
It's Virgil and his sister and his mom and his dad. And we're going to show that family in Shadow Cabinet. And it's going to be important. And so I want to see that beautiful Black family live action. I want to see Virgil Hawkins enter the world in live action. So as far as I'm concerned, it's a certainty. It's not a question mark. We're going to get there.
when you see the success of the Miles Morales Sony movie,
Yes.
and
Yes.
you're looking at that, and people are like, "Oh wow, this is so amazing," and how this is such an original concept and so cutting edge, and it's like Milestone did that with Static.
100%.
You know,
100%.
20 years prior. So I know a Static movie would be successful based on the reaction you got with Miles Morales. There's no way a Static movie could not be successful.
100%. So we just have to get to the future.
Yeah, yeah. What's our next question? Could Angela Alva be Hardware's ironmonger?
Interesting question. She is his nemesis. I
Okay.
won't say whether she's an ironmonger, but she is his nemesis. Here's one thing about real life. Most people, I don't think, could have told you who would have become their best friend. I think people think like, oh man, I really like that person. I want that person to be my best friend. But like 15 years later, someone entirely unexpected becomes your best friend. Enemies are that way too. And so Curtis thinks his nemesis is Edwin Alva, but it's Angela.
Wow. I think that's a huge clue.
Yeah, it's Angela. And we're gonna find out why.
Are we getting more after this miniseries? Hardware, maybe?
That's an excellent question. Okay, so let's real talk it. You know, Shadow Cabinet is a labor of love for myself and the team, for DC editorial from Milestone, but it takes sales, right? DC needs to see that there must be more Milestone. That's going to be done through sales, like with any other comic book, with any other intellectual property, family of those things. So Shadow Cabinet needs to get bought, right? Buying Shadow Cabinet is your way of voting for a future of Milestone in publication, and that's it. And that's why, we're bringing, as the team, that's why we're bringing flames. Like, we're not here to be casual. We're not here to play. Like, we're here to tell a saga for the books because it's deserved and because it's necessary. So go out there and ensure the future. Buy these books. Buy more than one. Give a copy to someone who knows nothing about this, but would just like a good story. Hey, guess what? Christmas is coming. Right? Buy people some comics. Just keeping it real for you. You want to ensure the future? We must ensure the future through financial action and wherewithal.
I think you did a post where you said, I believe today was the last day to pre-order issue number 2.
Well, issue number 2, it's so crazy, the direct market of comics. The pre-order date of issue 2 was 2 days before issue 1 came out. So it's so weird, right? I post every month when you have time to pre-order, an issue. So I'll post dates on 3 and 4. But here's the thing, you can tell your retailer tomorrow, hey, I want Shadow Cabinet. And if they didn't order enough, tell them to reorder it. I do that with my retailer. I'm like, hey, you didn't get that book? I want that book. Get it, or I'll get it from somebody else. But I want that book, right? So you tell them, oh, you maxed out? Go reorder some more because I want that book. I want the entire series, right? And I'm not asking anyone to do that, which I didn't do myself. That's what I did for Black Lightning. When I wasn't out there, talking the gospel of Shadow Cabinet, I was talking the gospel of Black Lightning. I put Black Lightning on my pull list with my comic shop, the entire series. Black Lightning 1 came out. I bought it. Why? Because that's important. And this is what we have to do. I saw a comment online. Someone posted that they bought Shadow Cabinet or they were going to buy it. And someone said, I hope it does well. And here's the thing about hope. Hope is an intangible currency, right? It has profound meaning, but hope without action is not potent, right? Like either you will help to ensure a future or you will not. You will participate or you will not. And so even me being here and being blessed to have the opportunity to write this story, I'm not sitting in the bleachers. I'm participating. And that's it. So we're trying to give people a story to remember, a story that is worth their money and that honors the legacy of this great fictional universe that gave us one of the most important superheroes in our culture, which is Static. And so, you know, we want a lot of people to come aboard for the ride.
It's important to make sure that you pre-order these comics.
Yes.
Go to your LCS, ask them to put it to your pull list.
Yes.
So you don't even have to go there every month. Just say, I want a pull list. Everything about this Shadow Cabinet, just put it on my pull list and I will purchase it every month. That's how you get your vote into to DC that this is a book that retailers want to purchase, that want to have it in their shops, and they want more of this stuff. That's your vote. And that's how you get these books to be successful.
That's it.
And order every damn copy of every copy of every cover. They're all fine.
Listen, you're not. It's a win-win situation. All of these covers are works of art, right?
Yeah.
And again, they're representing the multi-generational nature of the Milestone family. You got Dennis Cowan and you got Nicholas Draper-Ivey. It doesn't get more different and beautiful than that.
Yeah. All right. So what our next question? Shout out to Tron World. Thank you for the super chat. Appreciate it. He says, thank you for displaying his beautiful Iron Butterfly and majestic return.
She's a fan. I'm a fan of that character too. Big fan of Iron Butterfly. Yeah.
And Iota. Is Iota gonna be back in this series? That was one of my favorite Shadow Cabinet
questions. I love Iota. You know, and there was a series that spun out of the original Shadow Cabinet called The World Needs Heroes that Chris Cross was the founding artist of. And he would do things with Iota that would just break my brain. Right? But she's a great character. I can't say whether or not she will appear in the story. I can't spoil it like that. But again, you know, when you get to the end, your understanding of what a Shadow Cabinet is will be clear, and it'll be necessary for what's going on in this story.
All right. Will Duo be utilized in Shadow Cabinet in place of Zombie?
Well, Duo does appear on the cover of Shadow Cabinet #4, so it is a very good possibility that you'll see him because, you know, like, you should have some truth in advertising, right? So you might see him in this story. I think that's a good possibility. Now, how you'll see him and where you see him might surprise you, but you're going to see. I think you're going to see Duo.
Richard says he needs an origin one shot of Anansi.
So do I. I want that book too. He's a great character. Like, he made such an impact that I think he appeared twice in the Static Shock cartoon, and then they brought him over to the books. I mean, he's such a great character, and I wanted to, you know, just in having fun writing him, I just wanted to make him so likable and distinctive. And when I remember that page came in from Adagoon, it just blew my mind. And then Chris colored it. And, you know, we have this team chain, this team Shadow Cabinet email chain, and everyone's on it. And Reggie and Dennis are on it, and people give in new things, and it's just like, oh man, come on, I can't wait for this book to be out. I cannot wait. And so yeah, Anansi's a great one. I need an origin one shot of him too. Let's see.
All right, next question. Iota and Starlight were favorites of mine. Blink twice if they're coming.
Oh my God, blink twice. Okay. Okay. I tell you what, when we get to the end, when we are having the issue 4 conversation, we can talk about all of these Shadow Cabinet characters you're talking about, because I love them all too. But we cannot have the conversation about who shows up and who does not show up until we're talking about issue 4. But then throw out all the questions, and I'll have some interesting things to say to you about that.
Let's go ahead and pre-order issue 4. Why Zaka Comics says the issue made me smile. Just 4 issues. Joe, tell us we got more coming. It's too good.
Listen, the only way more comes, honestly and for real, all 4 issues got to sell out.
There you go.
Sell out. Sell out at the distributor level. All 4 issues, right? Which means commit to buying them, pre-order the entire series, buy them, buy all the covers. Like, this is not a scam. This is the good stuff. And then we'll see. But that's the best shot we have. And it's funny because when I first announced this, I first announced it at my career spotlight panel at San Diego Comic-Con. When I first started talking about it online, I likened it to Avengers Endgame for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And people got really scared, like, hey, are you saying like this is it? And I'm like, no, that's not what Avengers Endgame did. Avengers Endgame was the culmination point of 10 to 11 years of stories, and doors were closed and entirely new ones were opened. And then we moved forward, and we got WandaVision, and we got Loki, and we got Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and things like that. So Shadow Cabinet is a culmination point that will close some doors and open some new ones. Right? And so,
analogy.
huh?
So that was a very good analogy.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's the way we saw it. I remember we all got together in like a virtual room. There was a Zoom call. Reggie and Dennis were there. Marquise Draper, the editor, Chris Conroy, executive editor, was there. Reggie's assistants were there because, hey, it's Reggie Hudlin. He's got an operation. And we just talked for an hour. And we talked about, like, what did this have to be, right? And Avengers Endgame was where we landed. It had to be the culmination point. And so that really informed me. And then I went away from that call. And then 2 weeks later, I came back with a 21-page pitch.
What's up?
Yeah. And I can't do short pitches. I mean, I'm going to take a whack at one maybe next week for something that I hope gets off the ground. But this one, I was like, okay, for the 10,000-foot view and what it has to be, I've just got to write the whole thing out. And it was 21 pages, and I didn't get a lot of notes back. I was like, okay, this is the thing we're going to do. This is it.
Dr. Wizard, what we got next? Yes, it's been out. That's what we're talking out. Yes, it's the books.
Issue 1 came out on Wednesday, November 20th. So it is in comic book stores now. Yes. And it's 4 issues. So issue 2 in December, 3 in January, and 4 in February.
Yep. To what extent was the Miles successful because he was part of the Spider-Man lore?
Well, I can't answer that question, but what I can say is there have been a number of Spider characters over years that have not landed the way Miles Morales did. So I don't think it is primarily because of the Spider-Man lore. There's something more to him, and that something more speaks to a need. It speaks to a need for young people to see themselves as the heroes. I was in one of my local comic shops. I think it was about 6 weeks ago. Young man is there with his mom, and he says, hey, do you have the latest Spider-Man comic? And I said, who's Spider-Man? And he said, Miles Morales. Right? There's a whole generation, it's me, that probably the first words out of your mouth would have been Peter Parker, but to another generation, it's Miles. That's their Spider-Man, right? There's something about him that lands differently in our world as a reflection of something needed. There was something about him that illuminated the spider lore.
Yeah, and that's something
been missing for decades.
That's something is called Virgil Hawkins, is what Richard would say.
Well, listen. We just said that. Everything has its predecessor. Listen, Virgil Hawkins' predecessor is Steve Ditko and Stan Lee's Spider-Man. Dwayne said as much in the Static Bible. That makes perfect sense. But Static was not an imitation. Static was something different.
Yeah.
And strike it forward, Miles Morales is something different, right? But you don't jump from Peter Parker to Miles Morales. Peter Parker to Virgil Ovid Hawkins to Miles Morales. Yeah. So that's what it is. We're changing as a society. And the world is just getting harder for young people every single day. They need to see themselves as heroes. And that was part of the reason why Rocket had to be the main character of this story. Because this Black girl had such agency that she convinced an alien to put on a costume and go out there and try to end the drug trade and try to end the illegal munitions trade, like overtly. She did that, right? In her is this pure belief that there is a future, but we have to ensure it. You cannot sit on the sidelines and say, I want a better world. Like, honestly, how dare you? How dare you want a better future and sit on your ass and say, give it to me? No. That's not how it works. And that's why she's out there in the skies every day. And that's what Miles Morales is. And that's what Static is. That is our responsibility to paint the better road for young people who have inherited so much misery. Right? So.
Are you going to be doing a Spawn title next year?
Yes. We can talk about that at extent at another time. But yes, it's called Bloodletter. It is co-written with Tim Seeley. It will start in April. The main character is a Black woman who is part Haitian, part South American, named Tasha Thornwall. She has a very particular beef with Spawn, and she will not rest until he's dead for real.
Nice.
But yeah, so we're gonna mix it up. And my gratitude to Todd McFarlane and to Thomas Healy, the editor-in-chief of Todd McFarlane Productions. I mean, come on, Todd McFarlane was basically the tip of the spear of Image Comics, which changed comics.
Yeah.
Image Comics changed comics forever. And Image Comics came out pretty close to when Milestone came out. There was something about those early 90s that were so full of possibility and urgency and creativity, and it changed everything going forward.
You're going to have to come back and talk to us about the Spawn work you're going to be doing.
We'll do that. Yeah.
All right. Electric Birdie says, the Dakota verse is pretty grounded in science and sci-fi. Will the magical, mystical be explored eventually?
I will say that with the Shadow Cabinet and with Dharma specifically, we are looking at a little bit of metaphysics. right? Because, you know, again, with when you're dealing with Dharma, you're dealing with Buddhism, you're dealing with mythology. So the way that we're going to approach his abilities and his perspective is very much like esoteric and mythological. Anansi is kind of like the mystical, magical component of Shadow Cabinet. So now think about that. When you think about the first Shadow Cabinet, even though you had what you would call a pretty well-rounded group, it was all basically science, right? But with Anansi, you have mysticism. So he represents a bucket. He represents a perspective that is new to the Shadow Cabinet in general and new to the Dakotaverse in general. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's very important for him to be there.
Damon Watson asks, will there be an opportunity for Milestone to connect with the upcoming DC Power, the Rise of the Power Company?
That's an interesting question. That is a question. Wow. Well, it's interesting because Marquise Draper is the editor of both. I would love to be a part of something like that. I think we'll have to see. But again, it starts with Shadow Cabinet performing well, which means all 4 issues selling out at the distributor level.
Yeah.
That's the starting point to get you to that crossover.
Richard says Virgil Hawkins, aka Static, is the cultural icon. He is the young black funny nerd that many kids grow up being. He is what William Foster III said, looking for a face like mine. He is and was us.
100%. But the fact of the matter is sometimes life does things to us that we're not in a laughing mood. So I don't know if he's always laughing.
Foreshadowing. Elected Birdie Mitch says, will this Spawn series take from Caribbean and South American mysticism?
We'll be exploring mysticism from a number of angles in Bloodletter. Yes. And the fact that she is part Haitian will have importance. So yeah, it's basically going to be the secret history of the Spawn universe of the last 10 years.
Oh wow.
And you're gonna see things connect in different ways. You know, it's kind of like we see things from this perspective, but Tasha Thornwall was over here. All right. 90 degrees difference. It's an entirely different story, right? Like sometimes you don't know who's over there, right? You don't know who's on the periphery and you don't know who's behind you. All right. So that's it. It's a secret history of the Spawn universe.
All right. Well, last question Eye of the Watcher says is, will there be a trade paper of this new Spawn series?
Oh, multiple trade paperbacks. It's an ongoing. There will be multiple trade paperbacks.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm a believer in positive thinking, so I'm excited for a future in which there will be a Bloodletter compendium, the same way there are Spawn compendiums.
All right. Well, Joe, thank you very much for being on the show. Look forward to seeing you again next month, I guess in 3.5 weeks.
Yeah, 3.5 weeks. Thank you so much for having me. It's always good being here. Really appreciate what y'all do and you know the community out there. And so I'm looking forward to us talking again in a month about Shadow Cabinet 2 and how the story continues to unfold.
You've always been an ardent supporter of us, Joe. We appreciate you. I'm sure more so than even you appreciate us. Thank you all who have watched this. Please like the video, share it over your social media. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe to the channel so you'll be aware of when we do these shows again. Derek, do you have anything else? The fans are saying, thank you, Joe. and
Thank you
giving.
to everyone for coming. Oh man, Sean Damian Hill, Kevin, everyone that's shown up, James Tomlinson. It's been cool seeing everyone.
All right. Till next time, Black Comic Lords. We got you.
All right, all right.